Welcome back. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It is Friday, February 25th of 2022, and we're going to take a look at Bitcoin stock markets and what you can look for coming this weekend and what to be on the lookout for next week, as there is a lot going on to talk about. Obviously, all eyes are still on Ukraine, and investors are looking for the direction that that conflict is going to head. Is it going to escalate? Are other countries going to get involved? So this weekend and how this all plays out is going to be really important to obviously markets, investor sentiment moving forward, and then potentially with the outcome of what Chair Powell has to say next week. He is speaking twice next week, so we're going to get a really good indication of what they talked about at their last emergency meeting and what they're going to do. He's going to definitely telegraph what they're going to do at their next meeting. So we will get pretty clear guidance from the Fed, and I'll help unpack that when he speaks next week. So a lot of things coming up. We have job reports coming up. We have producer or purchasing managers index coming out, which indicates inventory levels, which is a big issue out there in terms of growth and what we're seeing. So obviously today the Dow ended up high again. Snap, continued the rebound, ended up 2.5 points up on the Dow, 2.2% up on the S&P, and 1.6 up on the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq led yesterday. It was the laggard today, but nice recovery from the markets overall over the last couple of days. And let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick. So as we discussed, what we're going to be looking for is the potential for Fed rate hikes and what they're going to do, payrolls and things like that. But let's take a look at this. Powell is going to be speaking on Wednesday at 10 a.m. to the semi-annual hearing at the House Committee on Financial Services. So he's definitely going to be talking about what they're going to be doing to fight inflation. Inflation is the number one topic in Washington right now. It's the number one topic with constituents and people, the representatives in Washington and with their constituents around the country. And then he's going to speak again on Thursday at 10 a.m. At the semi-annual hearing at the Senate Banking Committee. So everybody is going to be grilling Chair Powell on what they're going to do about inflation and how hard they're going to come out against it. And if they are no longer in denial that inflation is real, permanent, and no longer transitory. So it's going to be interesting to see how he comes out and what he talks about. We had a nice little rebound today in the stock markets and cryptocurrency markets like we talked about. Here's Bitcoin on the hourly chart, and you can see this drop yesterday that we were looking at. Yesterday was down overall. That was a, let's see, that was a drop of about, looks like 12%, and then had a nice little rebound. At one point, Bitcoin came back all the way about 15%, all the way back to about 39,000, could not break through the 40,000 level. That's the critical level Bitcoin is trying to break through. We'll take a look at that, and kind of up and down right now. I know that there is somewhat of a meme out there that weekends are very manipulated and things like that. But if you go back and look, I kind of charted it today, and I kind of charted the last few Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays on the weekend, and they're not always volatile. A lot of times the weekends are kind of boring and kind of flat because there's just not that many people. Traditional markets and investors are not operating, so it's primarily retail, and the traditional markets are closed around the world on the weekends. So a lot of times those weekends are flat, and you can just kind of take a look at the price action on the charts. A couple of days here lately, we've had some volatility, but in general, weekends have not been eventful or monumental in any way over the past few weeks. And of course, we keep watching our trend line right here. Whoops, that's the wrong thing. Hang on one second. Let me get my trend line. We're watching this major trend line now that was touched here during this recent little drop yesterday, and it was perfect little rebound there. So this is our major trend line right now that we're looking at from for this range, from a major market structure range, that if price breaks that trend line, it didn't quite touch it yesterday, but it came close. If price breaks this trend line, which right now is hovering around the $34,000 level, let's call it, then you could potentially look for some more downside. So this is the do not cross line. That's the line in the sand, and Bitcoin did not cross that line yesterday. So it listened well. That was the line in the sand that I drew, and it did not cross. So a little bit of an update. Let's take a look at the moving averages, because again, Bitcoin is still below all major moving averages. It popped up above the 50 day and broke down below. Again, now it's getting ready to back test that 50-day moving average. If price can get above the 50-day, that's a good sign. If it rejects, then you can look for some more downside. So just kind of keep an eye on that 50-day moving average. That's a pretty important moving average. Below that, we have the 100, and then at the bottom, we have the 200-day moving average. A little bit of an update on our death cross theory that we were following for that bottom. Several people have asked about an update there. So of course, all bets are off now, because we did say that what would invalidate any of this, and again, this was just a hypothesis based on this unique situation that happened where the death cross 50 crossing down over the 200, the exact same amount of days from the peak back here in April that it did here in recent November. So that death cross occurred when the 50 crossed over the 200 day, the exact same amount of days, both times in this recent range that we were in right here. So I thought that was interesting. And then we looked at, well, how many days was that to the bottom? And we brought that over, and we were looking for a bottom somewhere around February 14th. And of course, Bitcoin was trying to put that in right here at the $40,000 level. And we talked about that $36,000 level being the bottom for this range, for this local range, before a retracement and ultimately more downside. So what we were looking at is, if Bitcoin did retrace and then rolled over for downside, that was just a bottom right now before the retracement. That in this current range, before either continuation or a retracement where it rolls over and does break this trend line and go lower, that was our bottom that we were looking at, 35, 36,000. So far that's held. Now we have wicked down below to that $34,000 level yesterday, but it did not close below that. It's closing at 36. So that bottom that we've been looking at has held up pretty well so far. But again, all bets are off, because what did I say? That, you know, obviously this is just guesswork anyways. It's just looking at, hey, this is a neat pattern that occurred twice. So if that's the case and it continues, and, you know, how many days was it to the bottom here? How many days could it be over there? Where could that bottom be? It was down about, you know, a certain percentage here, a certain percentage there. Nothing was exact, but it was kind of neat how it all worked out. But again, the three things that we said would invalidate everything, would throw a wrench in it, would be, you know, obviously number one, a new COVID variant and another pandemic event. Number two, geopolitical conflict around the world. Number three, market events, big events in the market. We've had two of those three. We obviously have a conflict that's weighing heavily on markets, and we had a big event in the stock market. Obviously, the stock market had a nice little correction. We're going to take a look at that and see if that is a long-term thing. And more importantly, we're still watching the weekly, and this 50-day is heading towards the 100-day. And if those cross, we've seen what happens there. Price on the weekly is below the 50-day, and really until Bitcoin gets back above that 50-day weekly moving average, what we're generally have seen in the past, if we look at this on logarithmic, so it's a little easier to see, anytime price is broken below the 50-day, it goes down, breaks the 100 and touches and goes below sometimes the 200 week moving average. So these are the weekly moving averages now, 50, 100, 200. So anytime price has broken the 50, it's always gone down to hit the 200. Doesn't mean that it absolutely will, doesn't mean that it has to. It's just what it's done every time in the life cycle of this asset. So one more thing to take a look at is the Bitcoin halvings, and you can kind of see what has happened at the halvings each time and the amount of days from the peak to the halving in terms of where we are right now. So the first one was about 333 days from the peak to the halving. The second one, and you can kind of see where we're at from the peak of 2013 to the halving, and this was December 2013 to the halving, was about 959 days. And then from the peak of 2017 in December to the halving was somewhere around 882 days. And we do not have, well, the next halving is coming up in 2024. So if you go from the peak of this cycle. Some people say that 64,000 was the peak, but if it's 69,000 and you go out from the halving to the peak, how many days do we have right now? That would be 553 days. So that would be the shortest amount of time. So some people are saying maybe these aren't the peaks because of the distance from the halving to the peak the last two times. But the halving has occurred, or not the halving, but the peaks have occurred in December every single time in Bitcoin's history, except for the very first peak in 2011. That actually occurred in June. But after the halving, December was the peak of 2000 or 2013. And then we had the bear market. And then December of 2017 was your next peak. And then if you go to December this year, obviously that is right in here. Where would that be? Right here. So this year, actually it was November was the peak, but December is right in this time frame. So that doesn't line up either in terms of where the peak would be. So if we went out from the halving, 800 and something days, where does that put us? Where's December of 2022? So if we're looking for another peak in December of 2022 puts you out 938 days. So these last ones were in the 800s, but some people have thought that potentially this here was like a 2013 kind of thing where you had this little bump and then you went up from there, and exponentially from that point price rose 334%. So some people were thinking maybe that's what this is. If you look at the 2017 bull market and the last little bump there before it went up, that was 300%. So if that's the case, and you look at it from that standpoint and said, if this was just a little bump in the road before the all-time high and went 300%, that puts you at 250,000. So a lot of people are projecting 250,000 based off of that philosophy right there. Not so sure that that's a reality anytime soon, potentially down the road. Don't know about right now, but that's kind of what price is doing in the Bitcoin market right now and what the weekly looks like. And again, all bets are off the table right now with this Russia-Ukraine situation. We have to just wait and see how that shakes out. Whether or not that escalates and what the response to that looks like from around the world. Here's traditional markets. This is the Dow. And as you can see, obviously from the peak in January, a significant drop, but we've had a nice little bounce here. So the real question is, have these markets recovered? And is this a complete reversal that we're looking at? Is this a bottom that's been put in the traditional markets as well as Bitcoin? Or is this simply a relief rally? That was a nice little bounce of about 5.5%. And the Dow, which is huge for the stock market, it's funny to say that. Crypto, you can get 5.5% an hour for certain assets, but NASDAQ bounced back about 8%. The S&P bounced back. Let's see how much the S&P's bounced back over the last couple of days. S&P has come back 6.5%. So if you look at the S&P, the Dow, and the NASDAQ, 5, 6, 10% corrections are kind of par for the course in these assets, in these markets. So right now, the real question is, was this a reversal and are we going to continue up for a new all-time high? Or is this just a relief rally before more continued downside? So in terms of that answer, we are not going to know, unfortunately, until we get into next week and we get clear guidance from the Fed. And here's what we can be looking for and what we can expect. So obviously the Russia-Ukraine situation is first and foremost. That's number one. In terms of escalation response from around the world, what that looks like. We obviously know inflation is a big issue around the world that's going to affect growth, production, and consumer demand and spending. Interest rates are rising for residential mortgages. That's going to create a problem in housing. It's going to take a little bit of time for that to happen, but it's already starting. As rates go up, houses come down. I've given a couple of examples there of what rising interest rates do to a house, and a 2% rise in interest rates for a house of about $500,000, $400,000 affects it by about 20%. So about 10% per in value per percentage point of affordability. So every time rates go up 1%, that affects the value or price or affordable, what you can afford as a payment by about 10%, sometimes about 15%, depending on down payment, things like that. So that's something to look out for. And then the Fed, as we've talked about, if they come out strong, that's going to affect markets right now. I'm not so sure markets are anticipating a hawkish Fed, but we're going to find out next week. We're going to see how markets react to what Powell says, and I will help unpack. I will get Powell's statements, unpack that. We'll kind of look at it, read between the lines, because he's very good at Fed speak. He's trying to bring everything in for a soft landing, but unfortunately, I think they are painted into a corner, and they're going to have to take drastic action quickly to get hold of inflation, especially given the situation now with the conflict and how that's going to affect different prices on commodities and things like that. Those are the types of things that really affect people, especially at the gas pump. If we see severe escalations in gas prices, that's going to bring a lot of pressure on politicians to act and a lot of pressure on the Fed to do things. So interesting week ahead, interesting weekend. If anything important happens, I'll bring some updates and probably do another video tomorrow, just kind of check in. Sunday's family day. I don't really make videos on Sundays, kind of hang out, relax a little bit. So I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope this video helps you, and I'll see you on the next video.